friend on Discord recently reached out to me asking me to show him how to put back together his Dualshock 3 controller. I had an old one sitting around, so at the same time I figured I'd show you guys how to restore an old controller, make it look a lot better. This one's pretty dirty, as you can see. I bought this controller used, and it's sat for the better portion of the last 3 to 5 years. The buttons are filthy, and there's a lot of dust between the cracks and the seams on the controller. Definitely gonna have to try to get that out. The controller's shell itself is in great condition, and I think it'll be really nice once it's been cleaned up. Let's hop right in and see what we can do with it. There's 5 screws on the back we need to take off. Once the screws are removed, all you have to do is pull from the bottom and the top part here and just lift up. Pull that off and set that aside. We're definitely going to have to clean that later. First things first, we need to remove the battery. So put both fingers on each side here, wiggle it back and forth, and it should pop out pretty easy. A lot of these batteries are pretty old. If you want to use the controller actively, you might want to put a new battery in here. The triggers can come off next. All you have to do is just pull them straight up and they'll come right off. With the battery out and the triggers off, you can get a pretty decent look here at the motherboard. You'll also notice there's a lot of gunk here around the seam at the top. We're definitely going to have to clean that out as well when we clean the back of the shell. Loosen the main screw holding the motherboard in place. Grab a flat-bladed screwdriver and take it just to the side here of the rumble motors, unlocking the locks. Be extra careful with the locks here. And don't forget the ones on the other side as well. With both of those unlocked on both sides, all you have to do is grab the plastic frame on both sides at the same time and pull up, and the whole thing should come right out. With the motherboard out, you can actually see the membranes here, so pull those out. We're definitely going to have to clean those. As you can see, those are pretty gross. Aside from the buttons themselves, these are probably one of the grossest parts on the controller. Luckily, rubber is pretty easy to clean, so I'm not worried too much about that. The bumpers can come out next. All they do is just pull straight up and they'll pop right out. Go ahead and pull the buttons and the D-pad out next. Set those aside for cleaning later. And that was the last thing we need to take out. And there you have it, the front shell, completely ready for cleaning. Grab a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol and take it over the motherboard just to clean up the board bit. Gets rid of all that dust and grime. Even if it doesn't look too dirty, just go over it anyways, just to clean it all up at once. Let your fake inner OCD run wild. Make sure to flip it over and do the front side as well. Since that's where the joysticks are, that's where a lot of the dust and stuff's going to accumulate. Make sure to clean around the joystick caps as well, since that's where a point of contact is with the controller. A lot of the dust falls in there and it gets stuck around this edge. You'll have a lot of fun here. By now the controller should be looking a lot cleaner. Just make sure to change the Q-tip if it gets too dirty. Flipping it over on the side, you can see all the dust and whatnot that's accumulated on the side of the joysticks. Make sure to clean that really good as well. You can also take a can of compressed air here just to blow some of this off before wiping it down. I didn't have a can with me, so I just used the Q-tip and cleaned it best I could. You can see there's some hair on the side here. Just take the Q-tip and just brush all that out, and then give it a clean off with some rubbing alcohol. Since we're pretty much done at this point with the board, just double check it to make sure you didn't leave any dust or anything on it. Because the two triggers have a little piece of metal on the side, you don't want to put that in the cleaning solution. All you want to do is just take that Q-tip and clean those separately. These are all the buttons that we want to put in the cleaning solution. We're going to toss the rubber membranes in there as well. Obviously you can't do too much to clean the battery, but you can go over it with a slightly damp Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol on it. Grab a bowl of slightly warm water with a drop of dish soap in it and put some baking soda in the water as well. The baking soda gets rid of any odor on the controller parts, and it also does a good job of getting rid of some stains. Always good to give the controller a deep clean when you buy it used. Mix the buttons and the membranes in the water a little bit and leave them to sit for 30 to 60 minutes. Pull out the membranes when they're done soaking in the solution and just take a Q-tip to go around the edge, clearing out any dust or residue that didn't come off. The front might have some left over, but the back probably won't have much on there to clean. Make sure to clean the other membranes as well. When you're done, the membrane should look basically brand new. The D-pad itself is a little trickier to get into the center part here, but all we really need to do is just kind of dry it and get as much as we can. The last part we need to clean out is just the openings here, so just take a dry Q-tip and wipe around the inside on the edges. I've always loved cleaning and restoring old game stuff. If you want to go crazy with it like me, you can flip it over and just check the openings on the backside too. With it nice and clean, we're now ready to put it back together. After putting the buttons and the membranes back on, next put on the bumpers here, just hook them in here at the top. I pulled off the bumpers in this shot, just make sure you leave them on. I just pulled them off to check something, but I forgot to put them back on. I eventually had to take off this motherboard again to put them back. Make sure to put the screw in next, and it'll hold the motherboard correctly in spot. Give all the buttons and the joysticks a quick test to make sure everything feels good and smooth. You can see some of the plastic is kind of worn down, so it's not as glossy as it used to be, but it still looks a lot better than what it was, and it's very clean now. Once you're happy with how it looks, we can go back to putting the rest of the controller together. Just make sure that the bumper membrane sits right underneath the post of the button itself. If it doesn't, you can always just push it back a little here at the front, or you can reach in the back with the screwdriver and just push it back just ever so slightly. Make sure the guide rail on the side here lines up as well. With the controller standing up like this, the spring goes into the right spot when you're installing the trigger. Once installed, make sure that the trigger works before moving on. When you're installing the triggers, just make sure that the frame sits correctly in the guide rail here. Now it's in right now, but if it wasn't, this is kind of what it would look like that. You can lift it up and just pop it back in quite easily. If you had to fix that, just make sure that the bumper works correctly and that the membrane is seated. This one came out a little bit, so let's just push it back down, and now it's right underneath the bumper. Pop the other trigger on exactly the same way we put the other one on, and you're nearly done. Make sure to test that one as well and make sure it works before you close the controller. Battery is the last thing we need to attach. Make sure that the guide rail is on the top part here when you're pushing it in. Use both fingers and push on the sides to make sure it's pushed in the entire way. Battery itself just sits on this little rail here. Doesn't lock into place, so it can fall off pretty easy. The back is somewhat like a hinge. Put it up near the top near the triggers, then swing it down to lock it. And that's all there is to restoring your old controller and putting back together a Dualshock 3. If you want to see any specific videos in the future, leave a comment below and I can see what I can do. Thanks for watching, and I hope that helped.